This sponge cake is so soft, light and airy, moist and fluffy. It has a beautiful blend of amazing flavors of vanilla and chocolate. This cake is one of my favorite cakes. I love the texture of this cake and the simplicity of the ingredients that we use to make this cake. We are not using any chemical leaveners in this recipe, no baking soda or baking powder, and this is a cake rich in proteins, and the cake is not too sweet, and it is so easy to prepare, and our cake is ready to bake in a few minutes. So let's see how to make this beautiful and super soft zebra sponge cake. To make this cake, we'll need only a few basic ingredients: 4 large eggs, flour, sugar, oil, and milk, little corn flour to add more tenderness to our cake, cocoa powder to make the chocolate batter, and a bit of salt to balance the sweetness, and a little vanilla extract to add a wonderful aroma to our cake. So let's start by preparing our cake pan. Grease the bottom of the pan with some butter or some oil and line with a parchment paper, which will help us to demold the cake easily when it is baked. As we are using water bath in the baking process, wrap the bottom of the pan with an aluminum foil to prevent any chance of water leaking into the pan. So now our cake pan is ready. Now let's start preparing our cake batter. This sponge cake recipe is mainly based on eggs. So as the first step, let's separate the eggs into egg yolks and egg whites. So let's whip up the egg whites, and when they start to become frothy, add half of the sugar, that is 50 grams of sugar, little by little into the egg whites. Beat the egg whites on medium to high speed until they form stiff peaks. The secret behind successful sponge cakes is beating as much as air as possible into the egg whites. In the heat of the oven, those small air pockets trapped inside the batter will start to expand, causing the cake batter to rise beautifully even without adding any baking powder or baking soda. As eggs are one of the important ingredients in this recipe, always make sure our eggs are fresh and they are at room temperature. At one stage, the top of the egg whites will curl when the beaters are lifted. Continue beating until they form medium stiff peaks. At this stage, the tip of the egg whites will stay almost straight up when the beaters are lifted. And now the white part of our cake batter is ready. And now into our egg yolks, or the yellow part. We need to combine all the best of the ingredients into this except the cocoa powder. So beat the egg yolks and the rest of the sugar, that is 50 grams of sugar, until the mixture turns light and foamy and pale yellow in color. And now it's time to add all those liquid ingredients into this: the vanilla extract, oil, and milk, and mix them together with a spatula. And now it's time to add the flour mix. Let's add salt and corn flour into the flour and whisk them together to make sure the corn flour and salt is evenly distributed in the flour. And then we need to sift in the flour mix into the yolk mixture and combine them together until they are completely incorporated and they just form a smooth mixture. It's better to do this with a hand whisk and not using an electric mixer, because if we overmix the batter after adding the flour, this may cause the gluten strands to develop, and this can make our cake tough and rubbery. So now our yellow mix is done. And now we need to combine the white and the yellow. Let's add the egg whites into the yolk mixture in 3 parts so that we can combine them gently and smoothly. Take 1/3 part of the egg white foam and gently incorporate it into the egg yolk mixture, and repeat the same with the rest of the egg whites. At this stage, we need to take care not to deflate the lovely air pockets that we have created. If we are not gentle enough, the air bubbles may get deflated and our cake batter may not be able to rise properly in the oven. So whisk them gently to form a smooth batter. And now our cake batter is half ready. We are going to make half of our cake batter to be chocolate flavored. So let's pour in half of the cake batter into another bowl. And then sift in the cocoa powder into this. And if we don't sift in the cocoa powder and add it directly into the batter, it can create few clumps here and there, and we may need to fold it for longer time, which may cause the air bubbles to get deflated. So sift in the cocoa powder into the batter. So now we got 2 batters, vanilla and chocolate. Now let's pour in the batter into the prepared baking vessel. Pour in 3 to 4 tablespoons of vanilla batter and then 2 to 3 tablespoons of chocolate batter, and repeat the same with the rest of the batter until all our batter is being used up. And don't forget to tap the pan on the counter a few times to release any large air bubbles. And for the water bath, pour some room temperature water into a larger baking tray up to about 1 inch height, and then place the baking pan into the tray, and then we can take the baking tray into the oven. This is a very sensitive and delicate cake batter, as it is purely based on those feeble egg white foam as the raising agents. So this cake is to be baked at a very low baking temperature than regular cakes, and so we need a longer baking time too. So bake it at 300 Fahrenheit preheated oven for around 85 to 90 minutes on the lower rack of the oven in a water bath. If we bake the cake at higher temperature, the cake will rise too fast and the surface of the cake cannot withstand that inner pressure, and there are a lot more chances that they may break on top. This cake will form its shape and structure in about 45 to 50 minutes of baking, but it doesn't mean that our cake is done. Bake the cake for the rest of the time for proper baking, and if we take the cake out of the oven when it's not completely baked, say around 55 to 60 minutes of baking, the cake will shrink a lot and it will lose its structure. So give proper time for the cake to cook completely so that they get a stabilized structure inside and outside. And when the cake is completely cooked at around 85 minutes, switch off the oven and let that cake sit in the oven for about 8 to 10 minutes, and let the temperature come down slowly, and thus we can prevent any chance of shrinking of cake due to sudden variation of temperature. And once the cake is out of the oven, remove the cake from the cake pan and let it cool down completely in a cooling rack, and slice the cake only when it is completely cooled down. This will help you to get clean cake slices. This sponge cake has an amazing texture with that beautiful stripes, and they are so soft and fluffy and wonderfully moist. and this spongy texture of the cake is adding something extra to the deliciousness of the cake. Every time I make this cake in my home, it gets finished in a few minutes. I hope you will make this at home and I'm sure you will love it. I feel so happy to share this wonderful recipe with you, and I tried my best to include all those little things that will help you to bake a beautiful sponge cake in your home kitchen. Please write to me your valuable comments and please let me know how it turned out for you if you happen to make this recipe. I hope this video helped you, and if you like this video, please give a thumbs up and please share this recipe with your friends and family, and please don't forget to subscribe this channel so that you won't miss any upcoming recipes.